Hey, I'm Patrick McInerney with Straw Cats, and this is an attempt to revive a little scene noir slash horror slash silent slash experimental movie called Dementia. You may have seen it playing in the movie theater in the Blob under the name Daughter of Horror, whatever that means. The way it was originally released, Dementia didn't receive that much attention, and even in the few noir books in which it does get a little blurb, it's not looked upon that favorably. The complete lack of any dialogue is called a gimmick. The narration by, weirdly enough, Ed McMahon is said to be out of place. The direction itself is called hacky and obviously by a first-timer. And the original soundtrack is viewed as Dementia's only saving grace. Well, yes and no. We'll be mostly looking at the images, but more on the sound in a minute. Here, as we compare the opening and closing shots of the movie, you can see the throbbing neon lights that are reminiscent of When Strangers Marry, which countless other noirs from guys like Orson Welles would borrow from and popularize. The confident dollies and fades, the deep focus, this clearly is not amateur hour. We have hallmarks of classic noir that harken back to Strawson film more than expressionism, really. Specifically here, a segment from the movie Die Strasse when the same beam of light traps a soup line on a sidewalk. Here, though, director John Parker takes advantage of the relatively new film stocks that allowed for on-location, handheld, single-light shooting. This is experimental noir right here. Also note that even in this chaotic shot, he still managed to keep the seemingly unlit far background in focus so that we can clearly have a wall blocking her escape. Same here, and this shot is even more closely related to Die Strasse. Parker uses big, bold shadows and strong diagonal lines straight out of a Robert Siodmak movie, and actually does a fantastic job of capturing the look of the early 50s in the US while employing the feel of the previous decade's stark shadows, much like John Alton and Joseph H. Lewis would do in The Big Combo 2 years later. This cat and mouse game is a hallmark of noir and executed spot on. Notice how this soundtrack we're using doesn't comment at all on the action. It's just a slow, electronic, tonal pulse, a garnish on the dish. This is apparently a recording of a live accompaniment by a band named Psychic Teens who stripped the commentary and original soundtrack and did this movie the greatest service it may have ever seen. Dementia highlights issues rarely acknowledged in 53. Are those black eyes from domestic abuse, or is she high off her ass? This one's pretty obvious. Even showing a woman drunkenly sliding off a chair sucks all the glamour off the typical femme fatales and adds a stark realism to a movie that's anything but realistic. And these hallmark noir extreme close-ups, Dutch angles, perverted three shots, these rhythmic matching edits, they're all personalized. Parker frequently plays with our sense of space against us, just like King Hu did. What's in the frame, what's out of it? In Dementia, you're always on your toes. The suggested eye flow here in the center is constantly being subverted. And even when it's not, the spot your eyes drift to is usually filled with objects that just don't belong. Who the hell are those people? The opening to this dream sequence alone, it marks it as an all-time great noir horror hybrid. And what's crazier, no one knows anything about the director. I mean, seriously, look up John Parker for yourself. People also just sort of assume that he cast his secretary as the lead actress, and the rumor is that the whole movie itself was based on a dream she had, but who the hell knows? As beautiful as this shot is, in its original form, the whole thing wasn't marketable at all, so it got delayed 2 years, bought out, title switched, the narrator and the soundtrack were added, and it just faded into obscurity because, yeah, what people saw did kinda suck, and the gimmick was spoon-fed. But this clearly is more than just a quick cash grab. Even the familiar noir elements of violence are taken to extreme. It's not enough to be beaten, you're going to be laughed at while it happens. Right around this time, Ed McMahon would be spoon-feeding you information you're supposed to extract for yourself. The mother meets a cruel demise. Fate. Oh, fate! And the soundtrack would feel at home in a cheesy sci-fi flick. The whole thing was just wrong, all wrong. God. And to think, out of the maybe 5 people who have ever talked about this movie for more than a sentence, 3 of them compare this to Ed Wood movies. And come on, not even close. And even though we do see those perfectly composed frames, and we're about to see these shimmering halos of light around silhouettes, I mean, she's cutting off a guy's hand with a switchblade, drenched in sweat, panic, and shame. What was the last 40s or 50s movie you saw that shot for the opposite of glamour lighting? So the surreal nightmare at the end spins everything into chaos, and we're left not knowing where we began. There are nightmares within nightmares, and you wake up only to realize that you're waking up to another nightmare. Dementia isn't a scary horror. It's not a detective noir. And it's not a pretentious student film. It's a steady, throbbing panic. And if given the right audio treatment, which it now thankfully has, it's an inescapable pulse waiting to be rediscovered. I'm Patrick McInerney with Straw Cats. Thanks for watching. Adios.